If someone had told me that my own family would betray me for money, I would have laughed. Because no matter how many arguments we had over the years, I still believed one thing: family is family, and family protects each other. But I was wrong, because the people I trusted most didn't just betray me. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought they had stolen $10,000. What they didn't know was that their greed had cost them access to something worth over $500,000. And when the truth finally came out, nobody saw it coming. Hello, everyone. Before I tell you my story, please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy emotional family dramas, shocking betrayals, and satisfying endings. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how greed nearly destroyed my family. I grew up in Ohio with my parents and my younger brother Ryan. My father, Thomas Harper, was an honest man, a retired military engineer, disciplined, quiet, and incredibly intelligent. My mother, Susan, was loving but always favored Ryan, not openly, not intentionally. But everyone could see it. Ryan could do no wrong. While I always had to prove myself. If Ryan forgot to pay a bill, it was because he was busy. If I forgot something, it meant I wasn't responsible. That was simply how things worked in our house, and honestly, I learned to live with it. Unlike Ryan, I never cared much about expensive things. I worked as a financial analyst, lived modestly, avoided debt, and preferred peace over drama. Ryan, on the other hand, loved showing off: new cars, luxury watches, designer clothes. He spent money faster than he earned it, and every few months he somehow found himself in trouble again. But my parents always rescued him. Always. 3 years before everything happened, my father became seriously ill, cancer, stage 4. And suddenly, our world changed. I took leave from work to care for him. I drove him to appointments, sat beside him during treatments, cooked meals, helped him walk, and stayed awake countless nights when he couldn't sleep. Ryan? He visited occasionally. But he always had excuses: work, friends, stress. Something. Dad never complained. But I noticed, and I know he noticed too. About 6 months before he passed away, Dad called me into his study. He looked weak, but his mind was as sharp as ever. "Daniel," he said quietly, "I need you to promise me something." I sat beside him. "Anything." He handed me a small metal box, old, locked, and surprisingly heavy. "This belonged to your grandfather." I frowned. "What is it?" He smiled. "You'll understand one day." Then he became serious. "Don't tell anyone about it. Especially not Ryan." I was confused. "Why?" Dad sighed. "Because some people only value things when money is involved." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. But later, those words would haunt me. 2 months later, my father passed away, and honestly, losing him was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. For weeks, I felt empty, like a part of me had disappeared. After the funeral, everyone returned to normal life, everyone except me, because grief doesn't disappear overnight. One evening, I finally opened the metal box. Inside were documents, old certificates, government records, and several investment papers dating back decades. At first, I thought they were worthless, old papers, nothing special. But then I noticed something strange. Several certificates carried special legal protections. My grandfather had invested in government-backed defense bonds and protected assets many years earlier. Over time, those assets had grown significantly, but because of their structure, ownership rules were extremely strict. Transfers required identity verification and beneficiary approval. And according to the records, I was the sole legal beneficiary. Not Ryan, not Mom, only me. I was shocked. But honestly, I didn't care about the money. Not then. Because I had just lost my father. I consulted an attorney. And after months of paperwork, he confirmed something unbelievable. The protected assets were now worth approximately $500,000. $500,000. I nearly fell out of my chair, but I decided something important. I wouldn't tell anyone. Not because I didn't trust my family, because I wanted peace. Money changes people. And I had seen enough families destroyed by inheritance battles. So I quietly placed everything inside my safe deposit box and moved on with life. Unfortunately, secrets don't stay secret forever. One evening, I accidentally mentioned to my mother that Dad had left me some investment documents. Nothing specific, nothing detailed. But apparently, that was enough. A week later, Ryan suddenly became interested in Dad's old records. "Did anything valuable in there?" he asked casually. I laughed. "Mostly memories." He seemed disappointed. At the time, I thought nothing of it. I should have known better. 3 months later, I left town for a business conference. Only 4 days. Nothing unusual. When I returned home, I noticed something strange. Several files inside my office had been moved. At first, I assumed I had forgotten where I placed them. Then I received a call from an unfamiliar financial institution. "Mr. Harper?" "Yes. We've received inquiries regarding the sale of several assets." My heart stopped. "What assets?" The representative listed names I immediately recognized. My grandfather's protected investments. I nearly dropped the phone. "What are you talking about?" There was a pause. "Someone attempted liquidation procedures." My blood ran cold. Someone. Someone had tried to sell them. I immediately checked my documents. Several copies were missing. Missing. My hands started shaking. Then I remembered something terrifying. While I was away, Ryan had borrowed Mom's spare house key to feed my dog. My stomach dropped. No, no way. Not Ryan, not my own brother. But deep down, I already knew. I drove to my mother's house immediately. Ryan's expensive new sports car sat in the driveway. A car he definitely couldn't afford. And suddenly, everything made sense. As I entered the house, I heard laughter. Ryan, Mom, and my Aunt Karen celebrating something. Then Ryan raised his glass and said words I'll never forget. "Best 10 grand I ever made." Everyone laughed. And in that moment, I knew. They thought they had won. They thought they had stolen $10,000, but what they didn't know was that they had just lost access to something worth 50 times more, and I hadn't even told them the worst part yet. For several seconds, I stood outside my mother's dining room, listening, watching. And honestly, part of me still hoped I was wrong. Maybe the sports car wasn't Ryan's. Maybe the missing documents were somewhere else. Maybe I was overreacting. But then Ryan lifted his glass again and smiled proudly. $10,000 for a bunch of old papers. Everyone laughed. My mother laughed. My Aunt Karen laughed. And suddenly, my father's words echoed in my head. Some people only value things when money is involved. Now I understood. I walked into the room. The laughter stopped immediately. Ryan smiled. "Daniel." Mom stood up. "Honey, we didn't expect you back until tomorrow." I looked directly at Ryan. "Nice car." He grinned proudly. "Thanks." Then I calmly asked, "How did you pay for it?" The smile slowly disappeared from his face. "What do you mean?" I placed my briefcase on the table and quietly said, "Where are my missing documents?" The entire room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Ryan laughed nervously. "What documents?" I looked straight into his eyes. "The ones you took from my office while I was away." My mother's face turned pale. Aunt Karen suddenly became very interested in her coffee. And Ryan became angry. "Are you accusing me of stealing?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I simply answered, "Did you or did you not enter my house?" He hesitated. Then Mom jumped in. "Daniel, don't be ridiculous. Ryan was helping you, feeding your dog, helping me." Interesting choice of words. Then I noticed something on the table, a folder, from the financial institution that had called me earlier. My heart sank. Because now I knew they hadn't merely tried to sell the assets. They actually had. Ryan noticed where I was looking, and suddenly he smiled, not nervous. Not ashamed, confident, relaxed, Daniel. "They were just old investments. You should thank me." I stared at him. "Thank you," he shrugged. "You never even knew what they were. We turned useless papers into cash. We, not I. We, meaning Mom knew. My own mother knew." I slowly looked at her, and she couldn't even meet my eyes. That hurt more than Ryan's betrayal. Then Ryan leaned back in his chair. "You were sitting on dead money. I sold them. I took my share. And honestly, Dad would have wanted us to split everything equally. Dad would have wanted interesting because Ryan hadn't visited Dad during chemotherapy. Ryan wasn't there when Dad couldn't walk. Ryan wasn't there during those long nights at the hospital. But suddenly, he knew exactly what Dad wanted. Amazing." I quietly sat down and asked one question. "How much?" Ryan smiled proudly. 10,000. My heart nearly stopped. 10,000? Only 10,000? That's when I realized something. They had no idea what they had touched. No idea. And honestly, for the first time that day, I almost laughed. Because while Ryan thought he had won, he had actually destroyed himself. Then Mom finally spoke. "Daniel, we thought it was fair." Fair, that word almost broke me. "Fair?" I looked at her. "Did you ask me?" "No." "Did Dad leave those assets to Ryan?" "No." "Did anyone call me before selling my property?" Silence. Then Ryan rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. It's family." Exactly, family, which made their betrayal even worse. Then Ryan said something that shocked me. Besides, they're already sold. Nothing you can do now. I slowly smiled. And for the first time since entering that house, Ryan looked nervous, because he had never seen that expression on my face before. I opened my briefcase, pulled out a folder, and placed it in front of him. Actually, Ryan, there is something I can do, he frowned. What is this? Read page 3. He laughed. Legal stuff doesn't scare me. Then he started reading, and suddenly his smile disappeared. He flipped another page, then another, and the color drained from his face. What? What is this? I calmly answered. Protected government assets. Aunt Karen blinked. Mom looked confused. Ryan swallowed hard. I continued. My grandfather's investments were placed under a protected structure decades ago. Ownership transfers require beneficiary authorization, and according to federal records, I am the sole beneficiary. Ryan looked terrified. But I sold them, I nodded. Yes, you attempted to. Then I pointed at another document. And because you submitted unauthorized paperwork, the assets were immediately frozen, Mom gasped. Frozen? I nodded. Every single dollar. Ryan stood up. No, that's impossible, I quietly answered. No, Ryan. That's reality. Then came the bombshell. The total value of those assets isn't $10,000. Ryan laughed nervously. Okay, $20,000. I looked directly at him. $500,000. Silence. Absolute silence. My mother covered her mouth. Aunt Karen nearly dropped her coffee. Ryan looked like someone had punched him. 500. I nodded. $500,000. And because you filed unauthorized sale requests. The government investigation unit has already been notified. His face turned white. Investigation. That one word changed everything. Suddenly Ryan wasn't arrogant anymore. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't celebrating. He looked terrified. Daniel, I didn't know, I nodded. I know, because if you had known, you would have stolen all of it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, because deep down he knew I was right. Mom burst into tears. I never wanted this. I looked at her sadly. Then why didn't you stop him? She had no answer. Because there wasn't one. Then Ryan whispered, What happens now? I calmly stood up, picked up my briefcase, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned around and delivered words my brother would never forget. You thought you stole $10,000. But greed cost you access to $500,000. Then I left. But I had no idea that things were about to get much worse, because 2 days later, I received a call from a federal investigator. And what he told me changed everything. 2 days after confronting my family, I was sitting in my office trying to focus on work. But honestly, I couldn't. Because despite everything Ryan had done, he was still my brother. And Mom, she was still my mother. I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed. And sometimes, disappointment hurts far more than anger. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. But something told me to answer. Mr. Daniel Harper? Yes. My name is Richard Collins. I'm calling regarding your grandfather's protected assets. My heart skipped a beat. Who are you? I'm a federal asset investigator. And suddenly, everything became real. Mr. Collins explained that because unauthorized liquidation documents had been submitted, an automatic review had been triggered. Thankfully, no money had actually left the protected accounts. The system had frozen everything immediately, but then he said something unexpected. Your father planned for this. I sat upright. What? Mr. Thomas Harper left specific instructions. My hands started shaking. Dad knew. The investigator paused. Apparently, yes. He anticipated possible family disputes. Tears filled my eyes. Even after his death, my father was still protecting me. The following week, I met with the investigator and my attorney. They handed me another sealed envelope, written in my father's handwriting. I immediately recognized it, and honestly, I started crying before I even opened it, because suddenly it felt like Dad was in the room again. The letter began, Dear Daniel, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer here, and unfortunately, I was right. I couldn't stop crying. The room became silent. Even my attorney looked emotional. Dad continued, I know this burden may feel unfair, but I chose you because I trust your heart. Not because I love Ryan less, but because responsibility and character matter more than blood. I wiped away tears, then continued reading. If Ryan ever learns about these assets before he learns responsibility, he will destroy himself. Those words hit me like a truck because that was exactly what had happened. Then came the biggest surprise. Dad had established something called a family legacy trust. If everything remained untouched for 5 years after his death, the assets would continue growing. And after 5 years, the trust could be divided among future grandchildren and charitable organizations. But because Ryan attempted unauthorized access, he had permanently disqualified himself from receiving anything. Anything. Not $1. My attorney quietly said, "Your father made the rules impossible to challenge." And honestly, that sounded exactly like Dad. 3 days later, Ryan showed up at my house. But this time, he didn't arrive in his sports car because the car had already been repossessed. Apparently, the down payment had come from the money he thought he would eventually receive. He looked terrible, exhausted, broken, and honestly, for the first time in years, he looked humble. He sat across from me and quietly said, "I ruined everything." I nodded. Yes. He started crying, not fake tears, real tears. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I was jealous." That word surprised me. Jealous. He nodded. "Dad always trusted you. You always did everything right." And I hated it. Suddenly, 30 years of resentment finally made sense. Then he said something heartbreaking. "I spent my whole life trying to prove I was better than you, and I ended up proving I wasn't." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I quietly asked, "Why didn't you just talk to me?" He laughed bitterly. "Because pride is expensive." And honestly, he wasn't wrong. His pride had cost him $500,000. A week later, Mom came to visit. She looked older, smaller somehow, and the moment she entered my house, she burst into tears. "Daniel, I failed both of my sons." I hugged her, because despite everything, she was still my mother. She cried for almost 10 minutes. Then she whispered, "I protected Ryan so much that I never taught him consequences." And for the first time in my life, Mom admitted the truth, not to me, to herself. Over the next year, things slowly changed. Ryan got a second job, sold expensive watches, moved into a small apartment, and, for the first time in his life, started living within his means. No shortcuts, no bailouts, no rescue missions, just responsibility. And honestly, I was proud of him, not because he became rich, because he finally became accountable. 2 years later, Ryan invited me to dinner. He paid, not because I cared about the money, but because for the first time, he wanted to give instead of take. Then he surprised me. He handed me a small frame. Inside was an old photograph. Dad, Ryan, me, fishing together when we were kids. Ryan had written, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I cried. Because sometimes people can change. Not quickly, not easily, but they can. Last year I became an uncle. Ryan's daughter was born. And when he introduced me to her, he said something that almost made me cry again. "Meet your Uncle Daniel." The man Grandpa trusted. And suddenly, all the pain, all the anger, all the betrayal didn't seem so heavy anymore. People often ask me, "Did you ever get your $500,000? The answer is yes. But honestly, that wasn't my greatest inheritance. My greatest inheritance was something my father taught me long before money. Character matters because money can disappear. Cars can disappear, even people can disappoint you. But character stays. And in the end, that's the only wealth that truly matters. The end.